Montreal Canadiens rookie camp is now underway. And yet I want to remind you about a couple of key dates moving forward here. Rookie camp open on Wednesday. The main camp opens on the 17th. In between that is the Canadiens annual golf tournament on September 15th at Laval-sur-le-Lac. And then lastly on the calendar is the March 6th NHL trade deadline 2026 edition. But with the fact that what was speculated, what was reported is now factual. Carey Price's contract moved to San Jose. What does that mean? The Montreal Canadiens, on Monday's episode, as Marco D'Amico alluded to, finally start the season with some cap space, some maneuverability. Marco, what's the latest around the summer that never was? Offer sheet city, groundbreaking trades. Well, here we are into September. That hasn't happened. We're into the fall, more or less. What's
Well,
the latest on the on possible trades? Obviously, with a hyper focus on the Montreal Canadiens, and now they're expanding cap space.
yeah, I feel like if you were the Montreal Canadiens, what you just said actually applies. The rest of the league, however, did not live up to the hype. The Montreal Canadiens had in my opinion, three of the five biggest trades of the offseason. And it's just the market is so bone dry that like it's almost uh, it's almost laughable how dry it is, how conservative teams are right now because they don't want to rock the boat too early. And I think we talked about this a little bit. It applies to the 2026 draft. The reason we didn't see offer sheets is because all of a sudden you start getting your early scouting reports, and you're like, God damn, you're giving this guy a 5-star, and he's going to go like 10th overall on your list.
Right.
Maybe we should think about not doing an offer sheet because it is, at base for these top RFAs. I'm not talking about like shooting an RFA. A lot of people were thinking about shooting an RFA at Maverick Bork before he extended in Dallas, but I'm talking if you're going to go after like a Mason McTavish with an offer sheet, you're going to be giving up a first, a second, and a third at minimum, if not higher, because Anaheim would match that in a heartbeat. And that's an unprotected 2026 first.
Crazy. Right.
You don't want to be in a situation like the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Toronto Maple Leafs in 09 and 2010, basically gifting, or 2010, 2011, gifting the Boston Bruins a second and ninth overall pick for Phil Kessel. You don't want to be that team, especially for a divisional rival, right? You want to be careful. So there's a reason why there was a lot of talk. GMs used the threat of an offer sheet to try and force their other GMs to sit down and have more serious conversations about some of their RFAs that could have been available. One of those worked out. The Carolina Hurricanes engaged in early offer sheet talks with the Keandre Miller camp and the New York Rangers. And the Rangers said, hey, can't we just work out a hockey trade? And they were able to extract, I believe, Scott Morrow from the Carolina Hurricanes on top of draft pick compensation. So that's what you saw. Now, the reason why you're seeing nothing right now is because there are 29 teams in the league that think they're going to make the playoffs this year. 29 teams that believe it. But there are 29 teams that believe it. There are about 10 teams teetering on the edge, hanging by a thread. And that's the thing I want to put out. One NHL general manager said to me that they expect at least 6 teams to have a crossroads moment by the time we get to Thanksgiving. And I just want to stress this. And the Canadiens also believe that there is going to be more opportunity on the trade market then, because I don't have a direct quote from them. This is what I've heard from around the team. It's that when you get to that point in the season, the kind of assets the Canadiens have are more valuable than right now, because right now everybody's just worried about like trying to make the playoffs. Anything can happen. Get in the playoffs. Anything can happen, right?
Sure.
But the reality is the only time teams really think about, hey, maybe it's time for futures is when they throw in the towel on their season. And there is no better motivation of throwing in the towel this season than getting Gavin McKenna.
Timing is everything in life, though. Like the Canadiens last season, bro, what was their playoff percentage? Like 2%? And then they made the playoffs. Like, so like that's the balancing act. Like you may want to like set the US Thanksgiving
no.
or mid-November as the benchmark of we need to hit this point total by November 20th. If we don't, we're going to morph into sellers. The Canadiens taught teams a lesson last year to like sometimes believe your team, like believe in them?
There was less risk last year because there, and I mean no disrespect to Matthew Schaefer, but there was less risk last year because that draft class was not as perceived as this one has been from what I'm listening to from scouts. Like it was called a weak draft from the get-go, right? It wasn't. I don't think it was, but the Canadians felt like they were getting better value trading for Noah Dobson. You talk about situational trades here, right?
Yeah.
That was one of
Yeah.
them where they were available, they had the assets, there was an opportunity, and they jumped on it. Well, that they did it exactly that, and that's the kind of deal I expect the Montreal Canadiens to make, a situational deal. So I'll give you an example because this is the name that was thrown at me while I was in California. People wanted me to take a detour, go down south from San Francisco to San Jose, sorry, go from San Francisco, not to San Jose, from San Francisco to Anaheim, and try and see if I could voodoo magic Pat Verbeek to trade Mason McTavish to Montreal. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. The two sides want a deal. I know the two sides want a deal done. Pat Verbeek playing the long game, trying to strong arm the McTavish clan into signing an advantageous contract for the Anaheim Ducks, because Lord knows the Anaheim Ducks have a lot of prospects to sign over the next 12 months. So I don't see that happening unless there is a total, absolute conversational fallout. But, and this is the big but, if Mason McTavish ever becomes available, I don't know that the Montreal Canadiens would be the team to outbid everybody for him. It's not a situation. It's not a situation like Noah Dobson, where he had arbitration rights, was able to walk to free agency the next year, was able to use the idea of taking a bit less money to go to Montreal, that Montreal necessarily had the assets that the Islanders wanted because the Islanders had other plans for those assets. Like it was such a perfect storm situation, right? Whereas Mason McTavish can literally go anywhere and he has absolutely no say whatsoever. And I think that is kind of the situation that they're in. But I will tell you that if Mason McTavish makes it to the market, I feel like the Vancouver Canucks would mortgage their firstborn sons, all of them, to get him on the roster just right off the bat. And never mind him. You look at the Boston Bruins, you look at the Philadelphia Flyers, those teams will throw the moon at him. That I just don't feel the Canadiens fans would necessarily be ready to accept necessarily. And so this is just me speculating. Like, please do not clip this and turn this into articles, folks. But all I'm saying is it would take a total breakdown 180 of what we're hearing on Mason McTavish for him to become available. But we've seen that happen before. So I never say never. I'm just saying very unlikely in that sense.
What patterns have we seen from Ken Hughes through his tenure as general manager?
Opportunistic.
So where are they in the landscape of opportunity today as we look at cap space, look at the trade market, and how many holes does Ken Hughes look at on his team and say the only way to fill it is via trade?
Well, they haven't given up on Kirby Dach. Like, we're talking about this as if like Kirby Dach is an afterthought. They have not given up on Kirby Dach. They want to give him the opportunity to get some good reps in with Demidov and Laney or Balzuk if it comes to that. They have no problem, should he be healthy, to give him that runway, because on one end, they have to give him that runway. He's an asset they paid dearly for. I mean, Canadians are getting PTSD every time they see Frank Nazar do something good. And then on the other end, if ever you want to move on from him, you want him to actually increase his value, because or else he's just a lost asset, right? And in this world of hockey and professional sports, you don't want a negative asset after such a high cost relation to his output. You want to get some just value. And Kirby Dach is an attractive piece on paper because he's a big, lanky, right shot center. And teams, I mean, geez, the Calgary Flames would love for him to regain his form, because that's exactly the kind of player that they're looking for in their retool. But if the Montreal Canadiens would love to keep a guy like that if he's able to bounce back and find his rhythm. Mm-hmm. But if it doesn't work out, and this is why I've consistently said this, the only way the Montreal Canadiens would bite the bullet right now is if Kirby Dach just, I would say just did not handle his rehab properly, that he is more than just a week or two away from opening night from starting on the roster. Like, it would take like something like egregious for them to be like, we're gonna have to bite the bullet, because they're not there yet in their rebuild. Although I understand fans want them to be like hyper competitive, this is not the time to pull a Toronto Maple Leafs. This is not the time to pull a Buffalo Sabre. This is not the time to rush your rebuild. This is not the time. Okay. Every time a team has done this, it has backfired. There is the argument of what happens if you wait too long. Buffalo has done both of those things.
Yeah.
But the issue, yeah, the issue is they've already found success with this core without the need for a bona fide 2C. They feel like they have one coming in Michael Hage. Other opportunities will be available, they feel, in November and December and leading into trade deadline. The quote that was given to me by Jeff Gorton, this was about a month ago now, was, "We are comfortable with our roster today. We don't feel like opening night is the deadline for us being able to improve our roster. We'll look to do that during the regular season," end quote. That's everything you need to know. They will leave themselves open so that when the Canadiens make that kind of a trade for a top six forward, be it, another winger, a 2C, which I feel like everybody understands is where they want to go with this.
Sure.
That no one is going to turn around and say, "Oh, that was a bad move." They would take advantage of an opportunity, use the assets they have available, and bring in a guy that would lead to sustainable success and a strong option for secondary scoring on a team that desperately needs it.
And that's where, we bring back the word opportunistic. Ken Hughes, maybe a word to describe Ken Hughes as a manager in the National Hockey League, right, with the Canadiens. It can't come out publicly that Kirby Dach has a tremendous setback, hypothetically. You can't be opportunistic at that point if everybody in the league knows that the Canadiens are once again without Kirby Dach in this hypothetical world on the very negative side.
Yeah, and the other thing I will say, right, a lot of the players that we've talked about over the summer, right, or was it one of the teams that I pointed to right from the get-go is the Seattle Kraken.
Yes,
the Seattle Kraken have Jared McCann, right? A lot of people will look at Matty Beniers, but they feel like Matty Beniers is their number one center of the future, for better or for worse. And so you look at a guy like Jared McCann. A lot of ink has been dried on Jared McCann. I've been told that Jared McCann is unavailable from execs that have spoken to the Seattle Kraken. So what I can tell you is Seattle may very well change their mind if they're in the bottom five come Thanksgiving, because Seattle doesn't have a franchise cornerstone. They have guys that could potentially get there, maybe in Beniers or Wright, or some of the guys that they've recently kind of drafted. Vince Dunn, maybe, if he takes another step, but they don't have that marquee guy that's going to be in the top 20 or 30 at their position.
Right.
And so where I'm going with this is that's a team that could really use a Keaton Verhoff or a Gavin McKenna or an Ivan Stenberg, or you can go days and days and days explaining why it would make sense for them to tank, but Jason Botterill and company just don't see it that way. They may see it that way if they're in the basement of the NHL standings come November. And a guy like Jared McCann, although I'm not 100% convinced is a true center in the NHL, could definitely fill the void of that for one season, right? Depending on what happens and cost acquisition, and if the Canadiens see a value in them potentially extending it. But I think that the Canadiens aren't necessarily going to put themselves in a situation where they would be at a disadvantage, or that they would be at a position of leverage that would be unsatisfactory to them to begin discussions. And I think that's the key here. You saw Kent Hughes do it with Carey Price's contract. We don't need to move it, even though we don't have to move it, even though they needed to move it. It's the same thing that applies here. They don't need a second line center. But man, if one becomes available, you bet your bottom dollar they're going to be aggressive in following it. The only problem is 6 other teams feel the exact same way, can confirm, and there are none available on the market as we speak. But as we saw last year, and this is where I stress this, September 2024, had you told me that Dylan Cousins would be playing for the Ottawa Senators right now, I wouldn't have seen it coming. Right. And that is how fast things can evolve this year. The Montreal Canadiens were not in a position last year to put up the package required to acquire a player like Dylan Cousins, especially with Kirby Dach injured at the time. So this year, depending on what team it could be, there are options. There are some players that may want out. And that is where the Canadiens will strike. And they see that being the case in November. Now, I'm not saying that there's no chance that they add a center. I just do not know that they will add a top 6 center before training camp.
That's Marco D'Amico. Follow him at MN D'Amico on all your favorite socials. Read all his latest at rg.org with RG Media. We'll get into the theme, a lot of the theme this week on the channel at youtube.com. And you can be like Ken Hughes, aggressively follow and like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a drop weekdays at 10 a.m. We're going to dive into Kirby Dach tomorrow at 10. We're going to talk about whether or not he's going to be ready when October rolls around and the Canadiens look to follow up on their very unpredicted playoff bound season from a year ago. You can support us by supporting our sponsors like Little Bear, littlebearonline.com, everything you need for your cat, for your dog, from trusted friends to this show, family owned business that cares about your pet as much as you do because they have pets and love their pets and love that you go there because you love your pet. It's Little Bear, littlebearonline.com with delivery